Hi, I'm Mike Brewer, pastor of the Blue Ash Presbyterian Church, and this is Mike's midweek message. Thanks for looking in. Glad to have you. Yesterday was a day for some jobs around the house, mostly putting up shelves and coat racks and towel bars and curtain rods and such. That involves getting the drill out and getting the screws out and getting the anchors out, because you can't always hit a 2x4. And when you can't, you want to put an anchor, one of those plastic anchors or lead anchors, into the wall to make sure the screw has something to hang on to. My wife has always kidded me. She says, when I finish putting up a shelf or a curtain rod, you could do chin-ups on it if you wanted to, because it's not going to fall down. I take my anchoring seriously. Even a landlubber like me can appreciate the value of a good anchor. I like having someone's hand to hold if I'm making my way across a slippery patch of ice in the parking lot. I like having somebody to steady the ladder if I'm going to be standing up near the top of it doing some chore. In the front yard of our church, we have a nativity scene, and it's made of large, almost life-size plastic figures. They're lightweight and hollow. And many years I've spent the whole Advent season propping them back up because the wind blows them over. I noticed that this year they are standing upright, and I went and checked, and someone has driven stakes, long stakes into the ground, fence posts really, and set the figures down on top of them so they are anchored against the wind, the winter wind. Yeah. I appreciate the value of a good anchor. And I wonder what there is in your life and mine that keeps us from falling over. It keeps us from being blown off our feet when the wind comes. There's a wonderful verse in the letter to the Hebrews. I touched on it very lightly a couple of weeks ago in a sermon. I want to return to it now. It's one of the few references in the Bible to an anchor. The writer to Hebrews in the 6th chapter says, "We have an anchor for the soul, sure and steadfast, which reaches inside behind the curtain." We have an anchor for the soul, sure and steadfast, which reaches inside behind the curtain. Now, in ancient times on a ship, if you threw an anchor overboard, the anchor sank out of sight, but it still held you in place. This verse is telling us that we are anchored in a reality we cannot see. That reference to behind the curtain is a reference to the temple that was still up and running when Jesus was performing his ministry. The temple was a huge edifice with various courtyards for women and for men and for Gentiles. And then there was an inner courtyard where only the priests could go. And there was one more room beyond all of that called the Holy of Holies, the inner sanctum, where only the high priest could go once a year with sacrificial blood in hand. That inner place was believed to be the place, symbolically at least, where God lived in the temple. And it was separated from the rest of the temple by a great curtain. And as I say, no one under normal circumstances was allowed to go beyond that curtain. Except for a select handful of high priests, no one had ever seen the inside of that room. Well, when the letter to the Hebrews tells us that this anchor of our soul reaches inside behind the curtain, it means that we are anchored in the reality of God. We are anchored in the presence and the power and the grace of God, even though that is a reality we cannot see with our eyes or hear with our ears. It is out of sight and out of reach, and yet that is where our anchor lies, and that is what holds us in place. I love that notion. I love the notion that on the other side, where we cannot see right now, maybe on the other side of illness, or the other side of unemployment, or the other side of financial problems, or the other side of COVID-19, on the other side of sickness or loneliness or failure, even ultimately on the other side of death, we are anchored to God, and there is nothing that can take us away from God through that anchor on the other side of the curtain. Because Jesus Christ, our Savior, has gone beyond the curtain on our behalf and opened for us a new and living way into the presence of God through his death and resurrection. Until that resurrection is fulfilled for us in our own resurrection, we remain anchored, tied to God, held fast, so that nothing can sweep us away or carry us away from the strength of God. I hope that you share that hope. I hope you have something to lean on when you need it. I hope that there is an anchor for your soul that you can count on, that is, in the words of the Scriptures, sure and steadfast. Thanks for dropping by today. I hope we can get together again soon. In the meanwhile, be strong, be safe, and be faithful. Bye.